Hi, I'm Tom Luna. I'm a former school board member. I was privileged to serve as senior advisor to U.S. Secretary of Education Rod Page. I also had the honor of serving for 8 years as Idaho State Superintendent of Public Instruction. During that time, I also served as president of the Council of Chief State School Officers. One thing I have learned in all these experiences is that educating children is not rocket science, it's more complicated. On my podcast, Swimming Upstream, we will visit with courageous leaders who challenge the prevailing tide and inspire all of us to swim against the current. Let's jump in.
Welcome to another episode of Swimming Upstream. I'm Tom Luna, your host. We're at Excel and Ed in Atlanta, and we're at the last day here. We've had the opportunity to visit with education leaders from across the country, and today we are fortunate to have on our podcast Lisa Coons, who is the Superintendent of Public Instruction for the Commonwealth of Virginia. And thanks for being with us.
Happy to be here. Happy to chat about Virginia and the Commonwealth and all the great things going on.
So, was that a difficult transition to refer to it as Commonwealth when you first came there, or was that something that you knew and came very natural?
All states have their own vernacular and their own little quirks, but the Commonwealth became a pretty quick transition.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being here. Let's talk about your background a bit. I remember when we first met was when you were doing your work in Tennessee. But so talk to us about your background before that and what led you to the work in Tennessee and then eventually your state superintendent position there in Virginia.
Sure. I started as a high school English teacher and grew in my passion to impact children, went on to be a curriculum specialist, a middle school principal, an assistant superintendent, transitioned to Tennessee with my husband to be closer to family and his family, and had the opportunity to do a lot of different things, charter work, school division work, and state work in Tennessee, and was called back to the department by Dr. Penny Schwinn and her vision for children and the change and opportunities for Tennessee children, and really was inspired by her focus on children and wanted to be with her and her thoughts around academics and instruction, and was blessed to spend 4 years with her and really dig into the instructional practices and work that we needed to do to support our superintendents, to support our central offices, our principals, our teachers, and most importantly, our students in Tennessee.
And while you were there for those 4 years, there was a more and more attention being focused on Tennessee because you were actually moving forward and implementing those things that you aspired to and that Superintendent Penny Schwinn aspired to. And that's not an easy path, right? And when you talk about swimming upstream against the current, Tennessee did a lot of that. One of the things I wanted to focus on specifically in Tennessee is a number of states, including my home state of Idaho, has talked for many, many years about the need to modernize our funding formula. I've always believed that there's two things that drive decisions at the local level. That's the funding formula and the accountability system, right? And if you can have goals and aspirations, but if they're not aligned to the funding formula, or I should say if the funding formula and the accountability system is not aligned to your goals and aspirations, the funding formula is going to win every time. The accountability system is going to win every time. And you tackled those in Tennessee. Let's talk about the funding formula because it's a very complicated formula. They need to be modernized, but it's not easy. So talk to us about the path that Tennessee took and to actually implement a new funding formula.
I think the goal in Tennessee was to talk about the student and start about why we're in education. And it's about changing opportunities for a child. And each child has a different set of needs, and each one of those needs has a different cost. So if I'm an advanced learner and I'm gifted, I might have a different set of costs than if I'm a student who needs reading support or a student who's in a highly technical CTE program. And the beauty of the Tennessee formula, while it can look complex, is very simple. It starts with the student, it starts with those student needs and how it's going to work to fund that student, and each part of those funding gets a weight. And so school divisions, school districts, and communities and legislative members came together and started talking about what is the cost of educating each child and how is that different? And how do we build a system around those student-specific needs. We spent a lot of time in particular talking about special education and what the different costs of special education and needs are. We spent a lot of time talking about those academic needs and academic acceleration points. We spent a lot of time talking about the CTE demands and how each one of those pieces should be funded rather than blanket resources. Because what we know in education today is it's not the education when our outdated funding formulas were created where you could just put programming in. We have to think about each student differently. Yeah. So I'm really proud that the TISA work in Tennessee focuses on an individual student and gives flexibility to school districts to tailor resources, tailor funds, tailor programs that each student needs in their own community.
So that's remarkable, especially the people you had around the table. Once you came up with a plan that everybody was comfortable with, and I use that because sometimes you can't get everything you want, but everybody
Correct.
was comfortable with, there's a path, right? And usually it takes a legislative path, votes in the legislature, a governor's signature. Talk to us about what the obstacles were after you came to an agreement that people were comfortable with and actually it becoming law.
Well, I think there were a lot of components, right? Because you're not talking about implementing a new curriculum. You're talking about fundamentally changing the way we fund classrooms and education. So there's a lot of structures and a lot of systems and a lot of communications and a lot of support to be able to shift that funding for special education, that funding for CTE, a lot of support for school districts who have significant CFO changes in the way they do business. Your infrastructure, your technology, all of those things have to shift and change. But I think one of the most important things that happened in Tennessee was the amount of stakeholder engagement and amount of stakeholder collaboration to think about those changes in a very strategic, intentional way on the front end. Yeah. So it wasn't about retrofitting, which we tend to do in education. Yeah. We have this great idea, we pass it through the legislature, and then it's like, oh, how are we going to do this? Yeah. There was a lot of how are we going to do this and thought partnership from every stakeholder in Tennessee, whether it was a legislative member, whether it was the school-based teams, whether it was families. There was so much engagement that I think what Tennessee is doing now that I'm not there and I'm in Virginia, is really about executing an intentional plan.
One more quick question. Oftentimes when you're looking at changing the funding formula, there's a finite amount of money, so it means it's going to be distributed differently. And I can remember legislators walking up to me and saying, well, tell me how this is going to affect my constituents, right? And if it was an increase because of the new funding formula, then they were agreeable, but if there's any kind of a decrease, so was there extra money or new money put into the system in order to keep everybody whole? There was a hold harmless type of an approach?
The legislature as a whole committed to making sure that all school districts had the money they needed to support students, so they did put additional funds in there in Tennessee.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. Well, then let's talk about Virginia then. You've been there
7 months.
7 months.
Today.
Yeah. Talk about that transition, and you hit the ground running.
Well, we have 1.3 million children in Virginia.
Compared to Tennessee was?
Tennessee is just about 1 million.
Okay.
So similar sizes.
Similar, yeah.
But the children in Virginia need us to move, and the children in Virginia need us to support their teachers, support their principals, and support their school districts, and make sure that they have the resources and make sure they have the pathway and the framework to move forward to make sure that everyone in Virginia is really accelerating the work. So we had a lot of work to do, and we did hit the ground running.
Yeah, let's talk specifically about some of those. Well, first off, tell us kind of your vision or aspirations. You have a governor that is an education governor, right? And that's a title that many don't wear, but some do, and he's one of them. He was elected because of an education agenda. But talk about his vision and your vision for the work for the kids in Virginia.
I'm incredibly humbled and honored to work for Governor Youngkin. A lot of people wear the title of an education governor. He lives and breathes the title of an education governor. I have had phone calls on Sunday about a teacher or about a program. We've had many conversations about how we believe students should have the opportunity to learn. We've had many conversations about making sure parents are partners. He deeply believes in the education structure and how we need to improve that for Virginians, and I'm really proud to work with him side by side, to learn from him, and to make sure that we are serving all Virginians well.
Some specifics, like let's talk about literacy. That's an important, that's always been a passion of yours and the governor's also. So talk about the efforts in Virginia when it comes to literacy.
How much time do we have? I could talk about literacy for hours. One of the reasons I wanted to be a part of Virginia is the Virginia Literacy Act. It is the most comprehensive literacy policy framework in the country because it not only covers early literacy and early education, it goes through 8th grade. And so while early policies have iterated over the past several years, the Virginia Literacy Act really helps support our earliest learners. It supports our early literacy learners as other states do, but it also talks about our middle school. And that's an important space to be in post-COVID, is we need a lot in our middle schools to support literacy. So we talk about in all states the science of reading and brain-based science. And a lot of times in the past we had talked about the reading wars and those kinds of things. We can actually study the brain and know how children learn to read. The problem with that is we know that now, but a lot of our teachers weren't educated in that science. So we need to go back and make sure our teachers are armed with the best science, the best materials, and then they have reading specialists to support them. That's a lot of work for our teachers and a lot of support to help them get there. And the Virginia Literacy Act really puts that policy framework in place, but then allows our school districts to think about, what does my community need? How should I shape this? What materials among the approved materials should be there to support? And I appreciate the fact that we're talking about monitoring our students, supporting our teachers, and creating a district framework around literacy. We had a conversation a couple weeks ago with our superintendents across the state, and we said, what does it mean to be a literacy superintendent? And really helping our superintendents vision what literacy should look like is that hard work you talked about in Tennessee that we're now doing in Virginia. It's easy to say, this is our policy. It is nationally recognized. It's really hard to help your superintendents vision forward what that looks like in their school district and how you want to make that shift. So we're really excited to go arm in arm with our superintendents and help support them as they design programs that fit inside that framework and support the students that they have in their community.
You mentioned monitoring. What's the cadence for the monitoring, and what is the expected response to the monitoring, right?
Sure. So we have one of the smartest literacy experts in the country at UVA, and Dr. Emily Solari. She and her team have designed a progress monitoring tool that is incredibly comprehensive and allows school divisions, school districts across the state to monitor students' progress and then to dig in if there are challenges and really track whether that student is getting on track, getting ahead, or needs more additional support and intervention. So really proud of that system and support that has been designed at University of Virginia.
How can folks learn more about the literacy program? Just tell them where to go to learn more about what Virginia's doing there.
The Virginia Department of Education website and then the Virginia Literacy Partnership website. They are Googleable and easy to find.
Great. Let's shift gears and talk about another specific effort happening in Virginia as we speak, and that's high-dosage tutoring.
Another passion of mine.
Yeah, okay.
One of the things that we did in Tennessee post-COVID immediately was to do an opt-in grant for school districts to really do high-dosage tutoring. And we really lean into the word high-dosage, high-intensity, high-impact tutoring because we've all been around education for a long time and seen tutoring. And
so talk about there's multiple definitions today of high-dosage tutoring. So do a little bit deep dive into what your definition of that is.
I think they're all flavors of a similar brand of ice cream, right? It's about really getting small groups, 1 to 3, 1 to 5, 1 to 10 rotations with a tutor. And that tutor is not going back and remediating. So if I'm in 5th grade in mathematics and I don't know what a fraction is, or I don't know what part to whole is, it's not about going back to that 2nd grade curriculum. It's about looking at what that student needs, working with them on that particular skill, but in relation to their grade level content. So if I'm an 8th grader and I don't know what a fraction is and I'm getting ready to do algebra, I need to know what that fraction is, but I also need to know the relationship to algebra instead of spending months on just fractions. And what research is telling us is if I connect the two to that grade level content, I'm going to learn more quickly and I'm going to get back on track and a step ahead. So that, I think, is the sweet sauce when we talk about high impact tutoring, is not just the ratios, the duration, how often. It's really connecting that content and that tutoring to that grade level experience. We've all done MTSS, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 type things. Those are very skill specific and isolated. And what we're learning is that that's great, but the student doesn't actually understand how to connect that experience with what they're doing in their general classroom. And that is critical in our post-COVID world, is to make sure we are connecting what the students' gaps are to what they're doing today, and do that quickly and catch them up so they can be a step ahead.
So talk to us specifically about what Virginia is doing in that space.
Yep, very proud that our General Assembly put $418 million to helping.
That's a lot of money.
It is a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. They did it very quickly. Also very proud of our school districts in Virginia, because they are implementing, and we've visited multiple schools, multiple superintendents, multiple teachers, multiple students who are in tutoring now. So they had funding given to them in the middle of the year, September. They've already got schedules, they've already got staffing, and our school divisions stepped up to the plate. Each district has submitted a plan. I think we have over 75% of the plans. Don't quote me on those numbers. In place. They are tutoring now. They've staffed, despite all the challenges that we're seeing across the country. They have created innovative ways to get retired educators back in the classroom, aspiring educators tutoring, and they're using great materials that actually connect that in-class work with what they're trying to do in those tutoring spaces. So I'm really proud of all of those pieces and how we're really moving the needle for our Virginia students.
Yeah, that's incredible. I want to finish up talking about one more issue that they're tackling in Virginia, and I believe you also did that in Tennessee, and the funding formula is difficult to navigate, the accountability system just as difficult, and that's something that Virginia is in the middle of conversations on now. So talk to us about what you envision for an accountability system, and specifically the importance of getting it right.
I think a lot of times since ESSA and the federal plans around accountability, we have played around the edges. And we've played around the edges so much that we've made this calculus formula around accountability that even the educators who are being held accountable don't understand all the inputs or how they work. And I would say that's particularly true in Virginia. If you ask a principal how many students grew in his or her building, I'm not sure they could answer that question. So the work of the board has really been separating growth, achievement, and career readiness, and creating a pie that is super clear for teachers, for families, for students, and for communities that help us understand where a student is, where a grade level is, where a building is, and help really translate that to their communities, but also to the state, so we know where we need to support and what supports we need and how we need to support that. So there's a deep emphasis on how students are growing and where they're growing within that year, which shows the impact of the teacher, impact of programs.
So a lot of focus on growth when it comes to accountability, not just how many kids pass the test or hit the mark mid-year. What kind of growth did we see throughout that year?
And did they grow faster?
Did
they grow faster than was expected? If we expect all students to grow a year, did they grow 2 years? And that's the great impact you can see of wonderful teachers and wonderful programs in schools. And then one of the most critical pieces, are we getting kids ready? So in elementary school, are we really getting kids ready for middle school? In middle school, are we preparing them for the awesome opportunities that they should experience in high school? And at the end of high school, are they ready to go into a career well? Are they ready to be post-secondary, college ready, or military ready? And how do we really communicate that in an accountability system. So attendance is definitely a component of that, but so are early post-secondary opportunities and how many students are finishing those, not just how many are we offering. Are we not offering JROTC for military readiness? How many students are passing their ASVAB and ready to go into a military career? So we really want to shift that readiness component. So we're also communicating to students, families, and schools how they're making sure students are ready for the next step.
Are graduation requirements part of that accountability system?
Absolutely.
Is that something Virginia's going to look at and make adjustments to, or?
As we think about high school redesign, and I know we're almost at the end, we are definitely looking at what graduation requirements, what seat time requirements are required to make sure that we have flexible opportunities for our students.
And courses and stuff that are currently required for graduation, that'll be part of the conversation?
All part of the conversation.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yep.
Well, Superintendent Coons, thank you so much for being here with us on Swimming Upstream, and you've given us some specific examples of your experiences and work in Tennessee and Virginia where you're definitely tackling some of those issues that are difficult and require the stamina and the courage to swim upstream.
Absolutely.
And really appreciate you being here. We always end our show with one question, and that is, share with us one piece of trivia or information about Virginia, since you lived there for so long, Virginia, that would be new or interesting to other folks.
Well, I think from Richmond, you can be at the beach or in the mountains within 2 hours. But I think the most important trivia are the people in Virginia. I have never been so welcomed and so appreciated in every corner of Virginia. The hospitality, the charm, and the wonderfulness of Virginia is something that's truly special.
That's a great one. I appreciate you sharing that, and the Chamber of Commerce will love that you shared that. But thank you for being with us on Swimming Upstream.
Thanks.
Let's do it again soon.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. And remember, our children may only be 22% of our population, but they represent 100% of our future. If you found this conversation valuable, subscribe to our YouTube channel and find us on your favorite podcast platform. Swimming Upstream is part of the Strategos Podcast Network. To view the entire lineup of our shows, visit our website, strategosgroup.com.